Die Diaspora spricht.
Parlando.
Diaspora rede.
Falando. Diaspora
Diaspora spricht.
Diasporas speaking.
Përshëndetje, my name is Rina Limoni and I'm the host of Diasporas Speaking. For this episode, Srebrenica Genocide, 30 years on, survival, loss and the ongoing fight for justice, I speak with Selma Jahić, who together with her brother and mother survived the Srebrenica Genocide. Welcome to Diaspora Speaking, Selma.
Thank you very much for having me here.
As you might have heard, we start the conversation with 3 questions. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And what do you do in your day-to-day?
I am from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was born in Srebrenica there. I grew up in Srebrenica and in a close by town called Blječeva. So this was my living environment back then. Today, I am a content manager in a government-run office here in Austria.
A few years ago, you broke the silence. You wrote a very important thread on Twitter about your story, about Srebrenica and your family history. When we had our conversation for this episode initially, I asked you, what was the trigger for you speaking to a larger audience about your experience?
I was at the Black Lives Matter protest, so I was joining this protest. I was supporting and tracking everything what was happening with this movement. And I was in Vienna at one of these protests, and I was very emotional during those protests. I felt like this surge inside of me, like something is pushing me to share something that I've never shared publicly. And when I went home, I was very emotional, and I wrote everything down. Like if we look back in Europe at the time, and also right now, far right is extremely rising inside of European governments, and especially Islamophobia is on the high rise, migrants and so on. And I was like, I have to share something what happened recent European history, which was nearly forgotten.
In our initial discussion, you said also to me that people feel uncomfortable when they hear about Srebrenica.
The thing is, usually when you're like at the beginning, you with your question, when you tell somebody, yeah, where are you from? And you're from somewhere from Bosnia. Usually people are, yeah, I'm from Sarajevo, or yeah, I'm from Mostar, and so on, like really great places to be from. And when people in my community ask me where I'm from and where I was born, and I say Srebrenica, there's this huge silence. Like people don't know what to say and if they should ask questions. They feel very uncomfortable because this place is like open wound for us Bosniaks in general. So most of them don't know if they don't know how to ask questions, or are they afraid to ask anything. Most of them assume, because I don't look that old in a sense, and people assume, how can I be from Srebrenica? They assume mostly that my parents maybe are from there and that I was not born there. So they don't try maybe to ask any uncomfortable questions in a sense.
So you also said that someone told you that it is never spoken about also in the family, and then you have younger diaspora saying, Selma, I only learned about Srebrenica through you.
Yeah, I usually do also work with younger people. Like I do some discussions where I'm invited to, and there are many younger people, and most of them tell me this. Like there are people from Bosnia, and mostly Bosniaks also, and some of them, like my parents never told me anything about that, and I'm asking myself, why not? What are you afraid of? Like it's a safe environment. I believe talking inside of with your children, with your family, is a safe environment. It should be a safe environment where you can tell your story to your children. I don't know if many people or many parents are afraid to traumatize their own children with sharing their experiences or what their family experience was during the war. For me, it's a shame in a sense, because there are not that many people, especially in German space, who are talking about Srebrenica and also in general the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
You also said that in our initial discussion that sometimes things are not always based in facts, and there is another gap here, that in Austria and Germany and elsewhere as well, the knowledge that people carry is not always systemized. Why do you think is that problematic?
So I can tell a little bit of a personal experience that I had in my school initially. So I didn't know anything about the Holocaust back then when I was a child. I learned it through school, and in learning about Holocaust, one of my teachers also switched to a little bit talking about Yugoslavia because of the genocide in Srebrenica, and also because of mass graves and so on and so on. So after our lessons, my classmate, a Serbian girl, we were in a break time, and she told me, just stood up and she said to me, Mladic wasn't that bad. I mean, he took you with the buses outside of Srebrenica, so he was nice to you. I was totally shocked standing there. I mean, this was a girl who was born in Vienna. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I was like, who did she get this idea from? Who did she get this information from? Where did she learn this from? I don't blame her. She was a child. She was 14, 15. Yeah. So she must have had this stuff from her parents or somewhere close by from an adult. And this is the stuff what I'm talking about. If you're not taught correctly, factually, what was happening back then, that genocide was happening, what genocide means, what kind of war crimes were happening in Srebrenica, you get this kind of children who are totally unknowledgeable, who don't know what facts are, who are spreading hate and hurting people. Like I was back then, was really hurt by her words. And I didn't have any teachers there who were protecting me in a sense. I was all alone. My classmates didn't know what to say. One of my classmates, I believe she felt like this situation could escalate, and she took this girl outside of the classroom because I was at the tipping point back then, because even the lesson was hard for me to listen to. And many parents are not aware that maybe their own child, maybe they learned from their grandparents a little bit of the history, what we as Bosniaks went through in general in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And you have some classmate inside of your class who is denying these war crimes in front of you. You feel hurt. It doesn't matter if you personally survived these war crimes. You feel it through generations. And I don't want any other child to go through that I went through. This is really hurtful. And also it's bad for that child who said this same thing also. This child will be marked as some nationalist at the end of the day. I don't think any parents want their child to be afraid of nationalists. So we have to work on schools to take this in their own hands and teach how and what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also what happened during the how Yugoslavia fell apart. Most of the people, even in Austria, don't know how Yugoslavia fell apart. Most of them they were all the same people, and they didn't like each other for some reason or another, and that's why they started a war, and some people were killed, and that's that. This is the most basic thing that most Austrian people know about Yugoslavia. But they don't know what politics were behind it, what nationalism was back then, and how everything went through. And this is really, really dangerous, especially if you have right now people, especially younger people, who are getting their knowledge from TikTok, for instance. I saw many, many, many horrible videos about genocide in Srebrenica, how it was played down and so on. And younger children are looking that up because they don't have anything from school that teachers are teaching them about the fact from back then.
And this is something that is not new to you, as you had this confrontation, because you started school in Austria 2 months after you survived the genocide in Srebrenica. You never had the possibility, as you said, to process anything. If you feel comfortable, can you share your family's journey to Austria?
When Srebrenica was occupied in July, the last days, my mother, my brother, and I, we were one of the first who were deported from Srebrenica. I believe it was around the 12th of July. My grandparents from my father's side stayed behind, and also other relatives. One of my uncles, who was disabled, also stayed behind. And like I said, some of my family members, male family members, started their journey through the woods to get to safe territory. At the end, when we were pushed towards the buses from the Serbian forces, we already knew that something was wrong at that point, because they were separating the men and the women. In front of us, I remember clearly, like it was yesterday, in front of us was like this elderly couple who were really struggling to walk, and they were pulling the man from his wife aside, and they were saying like, you old man, you stay here, your wife can go on. And both of them were starting pleading like, please, can you go with my wife, she's ill. She won't make it to the safer territory. And they were started laughing like, don't worry, you will find her in the Drina. And my mother just pulled me and my brother to herself, like that we shouldn't look. And we were pushed towards the buses. We didn't take the buses. We were pushed towards the trucks. There were military trucks in front of us, and we were pushed towards the truck. One of the Serbian soldiers was complaining like, shouldn't we put the women and the children into the buses because in the truck it's too hot inside, they will probably die. And another soldier was like laughing, like, don't worry, they can survive this also, don't worry. So we were pushed in these military trucks. With us was also one pregnant woman. I remember she was really high, I don't know, really high pregnant. And she was sweating and her face was very red, like it was very, really hot that day. And we had no water with us and we didn't know where these trucks are taking us. Like we didn't know. They could have brought us anywhere. They could have brought us somewhere else and killed us and nobody would have known. So with this truck, we drove, I believe, around 2 hours. And this pregnant woman at some point fainted inside of the truck because it was so hot. And we stopped at one point and were told to get off this truck. So we got off the truck and we didn't know what was happening because we thought this was it. They will kill us. When we were outside of the truck, they told us like, follow the road. Don't leave the road. At some point, you will meet your own soldiers, like the soldiers from the Bosnian army. So we went, I believe, 1 hour or longer by foot along this road until we met the first soldier. And this soldier turned out to be one of our Bosnian soldiers. And he told us that we had to walk a little bit longer and we will meet someone from the Red Cross who will guide us to these refugee shelters. We went to these refugee shelters. The first night we were sleeping inside of this. We were outside of the refugee center where this refugee center was where today's airport is in Tuzla. There was this military airport. We were sleeping inside of one of these airplane, like I don't know what they called, garages for airplanes. And we were sleeping there. We got some sleeping bags and we were sleeping outside there until we were ready to go to this refugee center. The next day we were able to go to the refugee center and there we were like put inside some tents with other people and we waited there. Like we didn't know what was happening. We were waiting for all other family members who were still in Srebrenica. The next day, the next people who came, we were waiting for my grandmother and my grandfather because they stayed behind. My grandmother was not so well because it was that hot. We're waiting for my grandfather also. Only my grandmother arrived. And she told us that they took my grandfather with them. She pleaded with them to take her also. At first, they took her as well, but one of the Serbian soldiers intervened and they let her go, but they kept my grandfather. Also, other women that came the next day, they told us that they took their sons, like children, 12 years old, 13 years old, 14, 15, 16. They were all taken captive. And others told us like they were people inside the compound in Srebrenica and Potocari. And day after day, then people who arrived, horror story after horror story, more gruesome and worse. We never thought that they will kill people. We thought they will keep them captive for a prisoner exchange. Like they will take them somewhere and will be exchanged with other prisoners. We never thought that they would actually kill them at the end of the day because we were so naive back then. We still believed there's some humanity, but there was not. When we realized what was happening inside of Srebrenica, people, all of us were telling the world, like there were reporters there where the refugee tents were in Tuzla. People were telling them what was happening in Potocari, telling them these horror stories. I don't know if they believed us. Like I watched some news flashes from back then. I was curious to see what the world was talking about back then. So I looked it up. For me, it seems like they didn't believe us, what we're telling them. Soon it was clear that we will not be able to return to Srebrenica. We thought maybe we'll stay some days in this refugee camp and be able to return at some point, but soon it was clear we were not able to return ever. One of my aunts was living in Tuzla. She escaped at the beginning of the war, 1992, with her 2 children. Her husband was also killed. She took us all after a week, I believe, and we stayed with her for a couple of weeks. And we started to get in contact with my father, who was living in Austria back then. So we made plans to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina. The only problem is we couldn't get the passport. My aunt and her children who were living in Tuzla could get a passport because they were from Tuzla. We who came from Srebrenica were not allowed to leave the country. This was an order for our former president, Aleš Begović, because he blamed the UN troops from the Netherlands who were responsible for us, who failed us. So if we as refugees wanted to leave, the only option was for us to leave for the Netherlands. But we didn't want to go to the Netherlands. We wanted to go to Austria. So we made plans. We took an illegal route in a sense, like we were leaving illegally Bosnia and Herzegovina. We had no passport. We had to search a way to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina. We went through the south. In the south, there were still fights going on between the army of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the separatists from the Croatian army who were fighting at Mostar. So we had to go through that point, like through another war in a sense, in a war zone. So we drove approximately 6 nights to get to the Croatian border. So it was a challenge. Like we had to drive never detected by anybody, because were all enemies around us. People know that we are Bosniaks. So we didn't have, my brother and I were not allowed to talk, because as soon as we spoke a word, people will know that we are not from that region. So we kept our mouths shut. We got different names, like we got Croatian names, so that people would not know that we are Bosniaks. And through luck, we made it outside of Bosnia and Herzegovina and got to Croatia. In Croatia, we reunited with my aunt from Tuzla. She left the legal route. She had a passport. She could leave Bosnia and Herzegovina. When we arrived in Zagreb, in Croatia, we went there to the Bosnian embassy. Bosnia was an independent country, so it has his embassy also in Croatia. So in Croatia, we made our passports, our first passports ever. And with these passports, we were able to travel to Austria. My father was able to get a decree from the Austrian ministry to get us legally inside of Austria. And he was waiting for us at the Austrian border because he was a refugee as well. So he was not allowed to leave Austria. So one of his friends, a person who was working at the church in Austria, helped us to get to Austria. So he picked us up in Croatia and brought us to Austria, where we were reunited with my father. So it was quite a journey to get from a small country close to Austria, actually to Austria from Bosnia and Herzegovina.
You said to me in our other conversation that when you arrived in Austria, it was like living 2 lives, one on the inside and one on the outside. How did you learn to cope?
It was back then when we arrived, it's like I felt like I didn't know what was happening. Like yesterday I was in a war zone, and today it's like people are living the most mundane lives. Like they go in shopping, they have this much food, no one is shooting at them, the streets are clean, like no one is fighting for their life. And we didn't even have time to actually talk about the war, what was happening to us, what we survived. Nobody asked actually questions from us. Like as soon as we arrived, it was 2 weeks after I arrived in Austria, I started to go to school. In school, I didn't speak a word of German. Like I didn't know what was happening around us. I remember I saw this giant cross inside of the classroom. I was afraid because Christians and Christianity was not something I associated with something good back then. Like it was something negative to me. So I had to learn that this was not a threatening thing for me. Like nobody will harm me there. I didn't have any teachers who could like talk to me about what happened to me. And most of the time my parents talked with each other or other relatives who were living in Austria, but no one really cared about us children. Like we were children. What do we know? Like people were not able to understand that children could be traumatized from war as well. Like that was something that especially I believe maybe our parents were not aware of. It was like their own ignorance in a sense, because they had their own struggles, their own emotion that they had to cope with. Like my parents were 3 years separated from each other, and also my brother and I from my father. We also had to cope like building our family again together to get this connection again with our father and so on. So this was also another thing. And especially in school, for us, the first thing was to learn German, to understand people around us. And also we were afraid to be deported again to Bosnia and Herzegovina. There were many Austrian people who didn't understand what was happening to us. My mother started working inside as a cleaning lady for an Austrian woman, and I believe that was at the end of 1995, beginning 1996, when the war was kind of over in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And she said to her, look, the war is over in your country. Won't you return? Won't you go back now? And my mother said to her, where should I go back to? I don't have anything anymore. My house is destroyed. My relatives are killed. Where should I return to? I don't have anything anymore in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So people in Austria, I don't think they understood the gravity of war because they don't know war. Most of them have never survived anything like that. We had to learn our own way to cope. I started drawing a lot. Like this was my passion in a sense for coping. I was drawing a lot, reading a lot. I was not the most talkative person. I was not a very happy child in a sense because I didn't know how to express the things that I felt. Most of the time I was like suppressing everything that I remember. So we went after, I believe the first time we went to Bosnia again, I believe it was 1998, revisiting family members and trying to find everybody. Like we were scattered everywhere in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We were scattered through other continents all around the world. So this was also like coping this to be separated for everybody that you were so close with. This was also another issue. Like people were leaving all the time, Bosnia and Herzegovina, leaving to the United States, leaving towards Australia, leaving to other European countries. Like you are losing all your family members also in that sense. Like many of them I have never met again after the war. So it was really another struggle also. Then there was also this struggle to help family members in Bosnia and Herzegovina who had nothing at all. Like they had no food, they had no clothes, they had no home, like helping them to cope inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So maybe this worry helped us a little bit to not think about the war that much because we had to survive in another sense. So most of us were suppressing our memories, but I see right now, like on my parents and also other family members and also survivors who went through the woods to save territory, most of them pushed their memories years and years and years on, not thinking about it. But right now, because it's now they'll maybe living a little bit comfortable life, they're starting to talk about the experiences and starting to remember. And most of them are crumbling in a sense after that many years, because at some point these memories break through and it's really, really painful.
Što te nema, što te nema, kad nam mlado poljsko cvijeće biser niže ponoć njema kroz grudi mi želja lijeće. Što te nema, što te nema, što te nema. Kad mi sanak pokoj dade i duša se miru sprema i srca se glasa krade, što te nema, što te nema. Što te nema i srca se glasa krade, što te nema, što te nema. Što te nema.
the war is never over. It's not even the past for us. Something that you said that stayed with me is you said people see Srebrenica as 1 week, but when they don't see what happened before this 1 week.
Yeah.
What do people usually misunderstand when they talk or reflect on Srebrenica?
They just see the killing inside of this week in July 1995. Srebrenica didn't start in 1995. Srebrenica started 1992. Maybe even before, when the plan was made to erase every Bosniak and non-Serb from that area. Like my great-grandfather was killed 1992. He was hiding inside of a cellar. Was he not a victim? Was he not a genocide victim? My neighbors who were killed trying to chop wood because it was winter and we had no way of getting warm. Were they not victims of the genocide? Then also my uncles who were trying to get food to their family and were killed by bombs, were they not victims? And also the constant shortage of food because trucks were being withheld by Serbian forces and also Serbian civilians who were outside of Srebrenica, not letting their trucks coming through. Was it not also an act of genocide? And also the abuse of prisoners inside of concentration camps, the rape camps, was that not also an act of genocide? So there were many things that was a part of the genocide, not just this 1 week in Srebrenica. Many people don't know that what happened beforehand, before it exploded to this 1 week. Also these mass graves that followed after the genocide. Like I believe it was over 3,000 mass graves where people were buried and reburied to hide their crimes.
So the genocide does not start with the week. The genocide started at the beginning of the war in Bosnia because it was a project.
Yeah.
When we also you just mentioned about how UN delivered food from planes during the night. And something heart-wrenching you said is that my mom starved herself so I could eat. And this is a direct quote. And also you said solidarity didn't exist during the war.
The thing is, many people, I don't know if they have this idealistic view when people are in this kind of situation when they're struggling. I have to remind people, when you are reduced to your basic instincts, in a sense, like hunger, you have to feed yourself and you have to feed your family. There are no friends, there's no solidarity. I can share just what happened to my mother. Like, this was especially at the end of 1992, 1993, before the UN troops were assigned to Srebrenica to make it a safe zone. So my mother often went with other people, as she was alone with us two, my brother and I, so she had no husband in the war zone to help her. So she often went to find food somewhere in other areas and searching with men who were obviously stronger than her, and many of them had weapons with them. So, but she went anyway. Like, maybe she would get lucky and get some packages that were dropped by airplanes. So she went somewhere where they heard they were dropping these packages, and there was actually a huge load of aid where it was dropped. And suddenly one of the men just stood with his weapon in front of this whole load of aid. And he said, like, this is mine. And anybody who comes close, I will shoot them. One of the men was like laughing. He thought he was joking, like it was enough for everybody. He grabbed one of the packages and took it with him. And the other guy shot him dead. So my mother went home without any aid. And she said this was the last time that she went there, like going with this man and going like in this group of people to search for aid, because she would rather starve with us than be killed somewhere where nobody could find her. There was no solidarity. Like, there is also inside of the city of Srebrenica, there was a shortage of living environment. Like, you just moved in everywhere where it was free space. Like, if it's somewhere in the garage, if it's somewhere in front of a house where you can build a tent or anything, you move in there. If you, for instance, go outside and leave your living space unattended, like you are not inside that room, when you return, there will be another family living inside. Like, they don't care that you live there, especially if they had a husband with them and you are only a mother with 2 children. You're not strong enough to protect yourself, your children as well. So you had to leave. And that was the living situation for my mother. Like, if you are a woman with 2 little children, you you had it the worst because nobody would care about you. You are just a burden to everybody. Your children are too loud because if you hide with them somewhere and shooting outside, you're a liability. So we were mostly kicked out of shelters as well. So this was the life of women with children inside of Srebrenica back then.
There is gendered violence and untold stories, because you also said there were rape camps, but people don't talk about that.
The thing is this stigmata for women as well. It's like it's their shame to bear. Most of them don't want to talk because they want to bring shame to their family, to their husbands, in general, also to their children, that the children know what happened to their mothers, and not to be celebrate survivors of that. Like they are heroes, that they survived this and that they get a safe space where they can talk about their trauma or even maybe get therapy, because also that is another thing in our society in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where therapy is like something evil, that when you go to therapy you're crazy or something, and instant to see it like a help that you can get to get better. The thing is, it's still like a patriarchal structure inside of this, like even after the war, because I know during the war women talked about rape. They were afraid of it. Like it's for them, it was like worse than death to be raped. Many women said they will kill themselves before they fell into the hand of Serbian nationalists or into the hand of the Chetniks. As a girl, I was little, I was a child. We heard these conversations. Like it was not something the women hid. Like it was really fear that was with them. And after the war, there were like hushed talks about who they suspect was maybe raped or so. There was this fear to come out as one of these women who was raped. Like I felt, I don't know, like it felt like it's such a thing. Like if one of the women came out, like inside maybe my family or someone else, like the whole family has to bear the burden. Like it's something to be ashamed of. Like it's her fault for being raped. And this is something that we still have in our society. We have this estimation that about 20 to 50,000 women have been raped during the war. This is just an estimation. Just a little number came actually out and tried to get the perpetrators persecuted. So this is a little bit telling about our own society in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why should women be ashamed of the fact that they were a rape victim during the war? They did nothing wrong. And still to this day, we have this discussion. We shouldn't talk about that. It's something to be ashamed of. But it should be the shame of the perpetrator who did that, not the woman's shame.
Sadly, that is the case in Kosovo as well, that women are censored and shamed and pushed to the margin. They do not feel supported enough to come out and speak about their experiences of rape. And then this shapes how this period of war is remembered both in Bosnia and in Kosovo as well. In this conversation and in our previous conversation, you said something. The population was manipulated to support the war. Radios were destroyed. There was censorship. The Red Cross sent censored letters. We wrote in code. Can you share how your family stayed in touch? Because, as you said, also your father was in Austria during those years.
The first thing that I later on learned about this censorship was when my great-grandfather at the beginning of the war, 1992, was killed. So we couldn't write. We got the opportunity to write letters via the Red Cross. So we had this paper from the Red Cross where we could write letters, and they will send it to our relatives in the diaspora. My relatives, my mother wrote when my great-grandfather was killed, she wrote, "He is no longer with us." Like she couldn't write, "He was killed by a grenade." She had to write, "He is no longer with us." Because if you write anything related to the war, like killed, destroyed, and so on, this was censored with black ink. You couldn't read it. The other thing is what my father later on told me, because at the beginning of the war, 1992, he was still in Serbia. He was in Belgrade. So he learned what Serbian media was telling Serbs in Serbia. So for instance, there was like at the beginning of the war where at the Drina Valley, where my village is also located, there were news, for instance, the Bosnian troops are attacking the village of Glogova, the Serbian village of Glogova. If you are a person in Serbia, in Belgrade, you have no idea how the population in that area is in percent, how much there are Serbs and how much Bosniaks are living in it. You will believe it anyway, what the media is telling you. Only my father knew that in Glogova there are no Serbs. There are only Bosnian villages. So they're showing pictures of dead Bosniaks on Serbian television who they are painting as Serbs. This is how they manipulated their own population in inside of Serbia. The other thing is they shot inside of Bosnia, they shot all the television satellites. They cut us off of any power supply. So we had no power. We could not get anything working. Luckily, we were smart enough to get our own little power plants inside of, for instance, my village. We built it on a river. So we get a little bit of electricity inside of a village for lighting and to get radio so that we know what was happening around us. Without it, we wouldn't know what was happening. Like, is there any other city who was attacked? What was going on? How are the troops moving? And so on. And also, we got to listen to Serbian propaganda. We knew what they were telling outside, and the other thing, what was happening in reality. We could hear what they were telling the outside world and also what was actually happening inside our own territory. And the other thing is, there are actually many videos of Mladic entering Srebrenica and viewing his propaganda for national television inside of Serbia. The thing is, he was only showing stuff that he wanted to see, not the stuff that you should not see. Like, for instance, how they are separating the men from the women, how are they leading the men somewhere in secrecy for them to get killed. This is the propaganda back then. So they could have manipulated the people how they wanted. And the people in Serbia would have not known what was factual and what was not. If people have researched a little bit about the war back then, they would have realized how many Serbian journalists were killed by Milosevic. Those Serbian journalists who went to Bosnia to verify facts and learned a different story and went back to Serbia, they were hunted down as traitors. Many of them, there are many reports of these journalists who have received death threats or were killed. This was nothing new, but outside of this kind of area, the Western media never knew about this stuff. They were believing anything that propaganda was sharing with them.
Denial, as in the 90s, but it continues 30 years after Srebrenica. It continues to make news in Serbia. It continues in public and political discourses. And something you said to me is that people think you're attacking them when you talk about this, because there is denial.
I think the main reason is acknowledging that maybe people I know, maybe my grandfather, maybe uncles of mine have done something to confront my own family history in a sense. And maybe confronting everything that I've learned of, confronting my parents. As we know, we from the Balkans, especially, we're listening very much to what our parents say and what our elders say. They're always right and never wrong. And it's very hard to not listening to their opinion and saying something different. It's really hard to confront that. The other thing is, if you grew up in that environment, since your birth, and you never learned anything else and never have connections or any friends who are Bosniaks and never heard their story, you will believe it your whole life. It's like you've grown up in this fake environment, in this fake history that never existed. You have in Bosnia two different histories, or three different history books. In one, there was never a genocide. There were never Bosniaks killed in Srebrenica. This was a war of liberation for Serbian people. This is the stuff that they are taught. And suddenly someone comes and confronts that and said no, this is a lie. This is not what's happened. Those people you see as heroes, they're war criminals. Then maybe you have to ask yourself, what else is a lie? Why is this Republika Srpska even there? How could it even exist if it's built on genocide? So you have to actually try to understand everything, your whole existence in this area. Then you have to ask yourself, why aren't my neighbors not Bosniaks? Why do they live there anymore? Where are they, if they lived there once? Especially younger people, if you only have this national pride, it's really, really hurtful in our region to hurting someone's national pride. Maybe other people who are not from our region, for them it's not easy to understand. For many in the Balkan region, national pride is really important. It's similar to cuss your mother. It's cussing in your national pride. That's something very important for many people, because as I've learned of some genocide experts, many people, if they're reduced, they don't have any perspectives. If they don't have not much wealth or anything, the only thing that is left for them is their national pride. If you try to take that as well, they will fight it with tooth and nails. It doesn't matter if you're talking facts and they are spewing total nonsense. They will not believe it. They're so hard on their national pride, they won't leave it. It's the only thing that they have left. And that's why they will fight you to the end.
And this is for you a mission to fight genocide denial, because you said you go back to Srebrenica and you said, I try to teach people how close the history really is, how easily it can happen again. What do you want people, especially young people in Europe, to understand about Srebrenica?
The thing is, my mission is not revenge. My mission is not for point fingers at anybody. That's not what I'm doing this. The thing is that I want people to never become like those people who did this. Like, how can I not become one of these perpetrators? How can I not become eaten up by hate, to hate somebody so much that I will do this to them? What can I do as a person to not become that? It's easy for us who survived this to remember, but it might be harder for other people to not become these monsters. That is why it's important to listen to history and to know the mechanism behind how these structures work inside of genocide. Genocide doesn't happen overnight. Like, suddenly there comes this army and kills people, and that's that. No, it's a work in progress. Like, you have these plans, you hate certain people, you blame them for everything that can't do anything about. Like, for instance, my name Selma, it's already discrediting me for being a human being for them. Like, I'm a Muslim, my DNA is corrupted, that's why I'm a Muslim, yeah, and so on. Like, this stuff I lead into genocide. Like, talking about people, dehumanizing them. When you start with that, you're also in the direction to becoming one of these people. So how can I stop myself to becoming like that? It's the main mission inside of this, talking about genocides, talking about war crimes. It's not becoming like that and learning how to educate other people and protecting our future generations also. Because I believe we did not do a good job after the Second World War to protect the next generations. I don't know, maybe our generation could do a better job.
And you go back to Bosnia more than once a year. We just talked before we started recording. You said, I go and talk to the people how they live because they're left behind, and something that I will never understand what it means to live in Bosnia today because I live in Austria. You carry the memory, but you also care about the everyday and the issues that happen in 2025. So for the end of this conversation, there is a question I ask everyone, and I will ask you as well. If you could bring one thing from Bosnia to Austria that is missing for you here, what would it be?
This is hard. For me, the most is the air. I don't know. It's something in the air there. Every time when I'm there, it doesn't matter. Just breathing there, it brings me so much peace. It's different. I don't know. My parents also says that, and also other relatives. Like, it's like you're breathing for the first time. It's like you're stuck somewhere here in Austria, and suddenly when you go there, when I'm in Srebrenica and breathe, it's like I'm really breathing for the first time. This is why I feel that. That's the thing I will bring, the air from there.
And that's such a beautiful ending to this very heart-wrenching conversation. Thank you so much, Selma. I understand how triggering it can be. Thank you so much for sharing your story with the audience of Diaspora Speaking and for speaking up.
You're very welcome.
Procvjetala svaka staza ko što biješe divni dana po ružama i sad brska bistra voda šadrvana. Aj, šadrvana. Ispod rose zumbul gleda, iz behara miris vije, a za mene kada cvili i u bolu suze lije. Suze lije.